This time I'm going to call our hemp panel up to the podium. First, we got Dan Hunter. He serves the Assistant Commissioner of Agriculture for the state of Texas. He's a top advisor to critical issues on the economy, trade, and water. He oversees the matters of the U.S. policy and plays an important role in agriculture. Next, we have Calvin Trostle. Calvin serves as the West Texas Region Beyond the Professor and Extension Agronomist, having 21 years experience helping farmers grow crops in the presence of frequent droughts. Third, we have Dr. Charles Beall, graduated from Midwestern State University with a Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry and both mathematics and physics in 1983. He then graduated from the University of Wisconsin at Madison with a PhD in chemistry in 1988. Charles has worked in a variety of industries with his 30-plus years experience, and he is currently senior scientist at Dana Lab in Kilgore, Texas. Finally, we have a producer from Colorado, Rafe Schroder. He's a fifth-generation farmer and rancher from Campo, Colorado. He has a Bachelor of Science degree in agronomy from Oklahoma Panhandle State University. He helps operate the family farm with his brother and his parents, and together the family has a chemical and fertilizer business, commercial spraying operation, and a trucking company. Welcome our hemp panel to the podium. And who wants to be first? You want to be? We'll just come down the row then. Give us about 10 minutes and then for each one of you, and then we'll take questions.
Okay, great. Good morning. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm glad you guys fought the weather and the roads and made an opportunity to come here, because no doubt there's going to be a lot of great information out here for you today. I hope that with regards to this panel, I think we've got some great folks here who can give some insight on multitudes of different things with regards to hemp production. From my standpoint, at the Texas Department of Agriculture, of course, we played a role in this early on and have continued all the way through the process. So just as a quick history, back in most of you know this, in the 2018 Farm Bill, when it passed, there was a provision which decriminalized hemp and made it legal across the United States, and that all states that had been growing it previously under research and pilot projects could continue to do that. But those states who did not and had not done that had to go through certain steps. Texas was one of those about 10 states who still had not decriminalized or was not growing it on a research and pilot project. So during this last legislative session last year, the legislature had to do a couple of things to allow for hemp production to happen in the state of Texas. First of all, they had to decriminalize it as far as a state illegal product. Secondly, they had to give us, the Texas Department of Agriculture, the authority to apply for a state plan with USDA. And third, allow us to promulgate rules. So many people would ask, well, that shouldn't take long. We should have, 2018 Farm Bill, legislature ends 1st of June. Y'all should be up and running by the middle of the year. And I continued to tell folks, no, that wasn't going to happen. USDA continued to tell us, and we spent a great deal of time, Commissioner Miller and myself and others spent a great deal of time with Secretary Perdue, Undersecretary Beall, Undersecretary Northey, and talking about how hemp production was going to take place and specifically what the USDA rules were going to follow. They were very blunt with us, and that was that if you do not follow the rules that we put out, you will not get an approved state plan in Texas or in any other state. And people continued to ask as we got into July, August, September, well, when are you guys going to apply for your state plan? When are you going to put out and do your rules? Well, the reality is that we couldn't do rules because we didn't know what the federal guidelines were going to look like. We had an idea based upon the federal legislation that had been passed. I continued to tell folks it was going to be late fall before the rules came out and were finalized and put into place. Sure enough, on essentially Halloween, which I found appropriate, USDA came out with their federal guidelines and rules and put those out. About 30 days later, we submitted our state plan to USDA and at the same time published our rules. We actually pulled the rules back briefly to make some adjustments with regards to testing and sampling so that folks like Charles and them would have at least some clarity with regards to what some of the options were out there for them. So where are we today? with regards to your ability to grow hemp. Well, our rules comment period actually closed on the 10th. It closed on Monday of this week. We expect to have finalized those rules in a very short period of time. Most of the things that we will adjust have to do with some minor adjustments. I think probably some of the larger comments that we got on things that we could adjust were in regards to being able to utilize transplants that were coming in from out of state. I think you'll see some leniency there and some opportunities to bring in those that certainly have gone through an inspection process, a plant health inspection process, a phytosanitary certificate, something like that. I will tell you that most of the things that people were not happy with regards to the way that the rules came out, not just our rules, but the federal rules, were things that we have no discretion over in the state of Texas. As I said, USDA has been very clear with regards to this is how you're going to do it, and if you don't do it our way, you're not going to get an approved state plan. So why are they so strict on that? Well, it's because they don't want a different set of rules in Colorado. They don't want a different set of rules in Oregon. They don't want a different set of rules in Texas. And so they want some consistency across the board, in addition not only to how we grow it and how people are licensed and permitted to be able to grow it, but also how it's tested, how it's sampled, all of those different things, which I think brought up some interesting issues with regards to some of, I think, the challenges we're going to face. So after our rules are finalized, you'll be able to, we'll open up the licensing process. It will be a complete online paperless licensing process that you'll be able to go to the TDA website. Hopefully around that first week of March, that licensing application process will open up. You will go through and submit an application. You'll be asked to watch a short educational video about what you will be responsible for, what's going to be incumbent upon you as a producer. There will be a background check that's required by federal law, that you'll have to have a background check to look and see make sure you don't have a nefarious background or drug convictions or things like that. And then thirdly, after that, then we'll issue the license. Following the license issuing, you will have to tell us where you're going to be growing it. Once again, by federal law, they want to know not only the farm that you're growing on, but also the GPS location. So you say, well, why am I going to have to give up exactly where I'm growing it? What if I've just got a couple acres on the backside of the place that I want to put it on? What's that make a difference where it's exactly growing? Two reasons. Number one, and I continue to tell people this day in, day out, this is unlike any crop you've ever grown. You can't grow illegal cotton. You can't grow illegal corn. You can grow illegal hemp. And if it tests above those legal limits of 0.3 THC, when you get ready to harvest, you have an illegal crop. You have what's technically called marijuana at that time. Although I will tell you right now, you could consume a whole room full of 0.3 THC hemp this size, and all you would be is sick, okay? All that being said, you'll have to tell us the other reason that there's a need for the GPS, because I promise you, you're going to plant it, or your neighbor's going to plant it, or somebody's going to plant it near you, and Billy down the road's going to call the sheriff and say, hey, Sheriff, Martha's growing some bad stuff out in her backyard. And he'll have the ability to pull up electronically through a secure data site, the ability to look and say, no, Billy, Martha's growing hemp, and we have the correct information on it. So those things will take place. And I realize we've got a short period of time here, so I'm going to, one thing I think it's very important that you know that things that are incumbent upon you. So you're going to be responsible, not, as you said, for getting a license, for getting a permit, for letting us know where you're growing it. You're also going to have to actually go and register with FSA, with the Farm Service Agency. So even if you've never grown programmed crops before, you're going to still have to go register with them. So some people say, well, why am I going to do that? I'm not getting any federal assistance or anything on this. Part of that is, I think, the method behind the madness there is that eventually they want to know everyone who's growing it, so that when crop insurance becomes available in that state, they'll be able to utilize that list of people and be able to contact them and let them know crop insurance. That's one of the things you need to know. There is no risk aversion, essentially, in the state of Texas for crop insurance needs. Crop insurance is not going to be available for hemp in Texas this year. It won't be available until we have some production history. That comes down from USDA. You need to be aware of that. Secondly, you'll be responsible for sampling and testing. 15 days prior to harvest, you'll have to notify us, and then you'll have someone come out and sample your crop, and then send it to labs like Charles for testing. I think that this is one of the biggest areas that there was probably more comments that we received on our rules than anything else, and I know the feds did too. The thing about it was these are federal guidelines. People said because the way the sampling is going to work, you're essentially, up until the first 100 acres, you're going to have to sample every single acre is going to need a sample. And then you're going to be able to have a composite on that lot or plot as far as what is going to be tested in the laboratory. Once you are told that you have a legal crop, then it can be harvested, of course, and taken to a processor or manufacturer. I think that's one of the biggest challenges we have in the state of Texas is our infrastructure capabilities. If your crop is hot, if it tests above the 0.3 THC, it has to be destroyed through DEA methods. So in thinking about that, that's going to be another thing that's going to be incumbent upon you as a producer, that you will be responsible for the destruction and cost of destruction of that crop if it tests hot. So that's one of the things I think it's very important, and I think it's important that you listen to some of the things that Dr. Trostle has to say from the growing side, that Rafe has to say as a producer, that Charles has to say as a testing entity, some of those challenges out there that we're going to have to work through at least through the first year or so. More importantly, I'll say this. We're excited about the opportunity to grow hemp here in the state of Texas. I think that there's no doubt that we have probably the best opportunity of any state. Sorry, Rafe, coming from Colorado, but I think we'll have the best opportunity to grow production like no other state has done it, mainly because we'll be able to grow it almost year-round. What I mean by that is, many of our producers in the valley in South Texas will already had a crop in by this time. It'll essentially move north all the way up here to the high plains. We'll put in the crop, and by the time they harvest, we'll be replanting for a potential second crop, fall crop in the valley. And plus, I think we'll see a tremendous amount of indoor grow or greenhouse growth here in the state of Texas. I'm going to stop right there. I know there's going to be some time for some questions here in a few minutes, but that kind of gives you an overview of where things are. We're excited. We're ready. Hopefully the application process will go smoothly, and we look forward to working with you in the near future. So I'm going to turn it over. Dr. Trostle, you want to go next? Great.
Well, good morning, everyone. I told Brittany that she asked how the drive was up from Lubbock, and I said, yeah, it was icy a little bit. And in January, for about most of the past 18 years, I go to Fargo, North Dakota for a National Sunflower Association meeting, and I had less trouble getting to Fargo in January than I had getting to Amarillo this morning. But anyway, happy to be here. Calvin Trostle, I work for Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, and after 21 years in Lubbock, I'm often introduced as the non-cotton guy. I heard somebody over here at my left laugh, okay? That's what I'm used to. And I think how I ended up with the hemp is in part because I have experience. I've developed the learning process of how you navigate learning about a new crop, growing, all the questions that producers deal with and so forth. And so I think in some ways I've had the opportunity to kind of take a lead on that. Just a couple of things. The first thing, there's a lot of hype that is driving the conversation about hemp in Texas, and that's mostly all related to CBD. It's interesting here that in the Texas High Plains, that I would say many, if not even perhaps, Dan, most of the established farmers, keyword established farmers, are as interested, if not more so, in the long-term prospects for fiber. And there's one announcement of fiber processing plant in Lubbock. There's some things that need to happen. I think there's another announcement that's going to come soon. And AgriLife is committed with all of our partners, whoever our clientele would be across the state, to work with these people. I believe compared to some of the other states, with the possible exception of Kentucky, that AgriLife is going to be very very active in working with hemp. We have an education team. We've got a number of individuals that say once the licenses are here, there's a number of different things that have been mentioned that various colleagues with various expertise want to work on. For example, one of them is we have the 2 plant pathologists here in the state that are interested in hemp, one here in Amarillo, Dr. Ken Obasa, the other Dr. Tom Isakeet in College Station. And Dr. Isakeet's interest is probably as soon as he can, starting a pot study under controlled conditions in a greenhouse to look at the effect of some of the diseases that we might encounter with hemp in Texas. We don't have to worry about cotton root rot up here in the Texas High Plains, but cotton root rot is a big issue in many parts of Texas. And I think that example of Dr. Isakeet's work will give us an early lead, even before field conditions, in terms of what to expect with that. I've been involved with helping organize and conducting about 15 or so mini seminars across the state. And the meetings that we had in January, there were 3 things that kind of stood out in response to the attendees at that workshop. First of all, we would ask for a show of hands, how many of you are currently producers or would consider yourselves a farmer or currently a producer? and across all those meetings, the range of responses was about 20 to 40% of the people would raise their hand. But when we ask, how many of you are interested at some level in growing hemp, we would have about 40% to maybe 2/3 of the people raise their hand. And so I think a lot of that is probably individuals that are thinking about an acre or 2, very small acreages. And I think there's a huge need there for addressing some of their concerns. Some of these people have no agriculture background. Our Ag Economics group in College Station has looked at some early budgets. And the 3 concerns that came out of the meetings that we've had since January, the first one is for CBD, the prices have gone through a tremendous crash. And right now, it really doesn't look very favorable under current circumstances for an individual growing CBD themselves. There will be a lot of this done. We don't know if there will be some price rallies. Some producers have the opportunity maybe to grow or lease their land for hemp production and receive a flat payment and then manage the crop, and then expenses are reimbursed by the by the contractor, the buyer. So that's a different model. So the farmer doesn't own the crop, so that's much less risky. The second issue is, how do you identify good quality, high quality seed? That's a huge issue. We hear about it over and over and over. Rafe, you've had trouble with that yourself, and you're gaining experience in this process. And as we have some type of certification within Texas, I think within 2 years we're going to see some of the issues with seed quality will start to fade away. Third issue was how to identify a reliable contractor or buyer, especially on the CBD. There aren't very many out there right now that are actively soliciting acreage and agreements with would-be producers across Texas to grow for CBD. We will see as we get closer to the licensure process. But it was interesting to me, Dan, that in all the issues that people raised, the rules were not among their lead concerns. So maybe you'll be relieved to hear about that. But just some other things in terms of what we expect going forward is some of the A&M focus on research to start with will be variety testing. We don't know about these varieties. I have some special interest in how these varieties will perform across far south Texas, especially if they are photoperiod sensitive type lines. That means if you go further south, they could have a very different behavior in how they grow. Planting dates are important. We have a couple of individuals that are interested in looking at the breeding aspect of hemp. And so I think overall, as I often kid people, I say we need to set our clocks here and have a meeting in five years from today here at 9 a.m. and see how it all turned out, what we've learned and so forth. There is a huge learning curve. I've told my bosses and several folks like you, I said, I feel like for me, it's 1999 all over again. What was special about 1999? That was my first year in Lubbock. And I was Kansas farm boy. I'd been in the High Plains once. I'd camped overnight at Paladero. So now this is my job up here. And a different way of farming and so forth. In many regards, I felt like my learning curve was not a curve, it was a straight line, and it was something about like this. And so with that regard, I feel in some ways inadequate to be in this position I'm in when I have zero experience in the past. But I think a lot of us are going to learn together. I have been to Rafe's farm twice as an example of part of the learning process that I have going forward, and that's a big help. 2019 was the first year of hemp production in Utah. Not a big crop state as far as hemp is concerned. We think in the range of about 6,000 or 7,000 acres. Between the combination of licenses coming late, poor seed quality, people who did not know what they were doing, people who did not properly plan for harvesting and drying, contracts that didn't hold up, it's estimated that about 58% of the crop in Utah failed or will not make it to market. And I know that's bothersome, but on behalf of the A&M Ag program, we're committed to help ensure that Texas can do way better than that. Rafe?
Hello, everybody. My name's Rafe Schroder. I came down here to speak more than any. I mean, the main reason was just not to talk anybody into growing hemp, but more just kind of look at it from a producer side standpoint. And I don't want to see anybody get hurt. Is my main deal. So we kind of went into this with both eyes open. We're a corn, wheat, cattle farm, alfalfa. That's predominantly what we do, and we figured, if we can beat the economics of our corn game and our cattle game a little bit, we'll try some hemp. So we tried just a little bit, 3,000 acres. We planted 26 pivots last summer. My brother, he's 18 months younger than me, and we kind of jumped in with both feet, got a contract with a company, more as like hey, we need some hemp grown. You boys are out there wanting to work. We'll contract with you guys, and we'll grow all the hemp you want, basically. So we didn't per se take the risk on the crop side. We more went at it like a contracting service and says we'll do X for X, and that's how we eliminated our risk. But today, if I went out there and grown the most beautiful hemp crop in the world and it was harvested at the edge of the field, I can't tell you what to do with it. And if you want to feel good and get excited about growing about hemp, go to a hemp expo, because them guys will talk you into growing hemp all day long. But if you want to face the reality, and I mean, it's all emerging. I'm not trying to speak negatively towards this crop, but reality is reality, and we're all farmers and ranchers, and we want to see the next big boom and the next big economy emerge. But I don't want to see anybody lose a bunch of money going at this either. So kind of our story, my brother and I, there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat when it comes to hemp. So you can really go after high-powered genetics and buy that dollar a seed hemp, or you can maybe go at it more like a shotgun effect and try to plant a bunch of seeds per acre, grow some dioecious, and grow grain and CBD at the same time. And that was kind of the more approach we had. Out of our 3,000 acres, we only did 40 acres of high CBD. And on that 40 acres, we bought expensive seed that's supposed to be all feminized, and we did transplants. We popped them in a greenhouse, and we did 74,000 transplants and planted them with a top planter, like 8-inch plugs, and that was something. We worked anywhere from 150 guys on the payroll to 10 guys every week. So the 40-acre field we did out of the 3,000, so the 40 acres was the high CBD, and it wasn't supposed to pollinate. We did it 10 miles away from every other grow we had. So the idea was get it far enough away that it would be 100% female plants, and if we did have 1% males pop up, we're going to pull them so we don't have pollination. Well, in the end, this high dollar seed we bought ended up having males in it, 2% males probably. And then on top of that, we probably had another 6 to 7% hermaphrodite and go have pollen sacs on them too. So even if you take all the right measures and spend all the money and do everything right, so there's just no checks and balances in the genetics yet. I mean, you can feel good about buying a bag of corn seed from Decal Pioneer and know that somewhat they're going to stand behind it, but I can tell you that company didn't stand behind a single seed. They're willing to give us more seed for next year, but what good's that going to do? So on top of that on that 40 acres, we got tested a week before harvest. And keep in mind, this is mid-October, and the freeze is coming. And we told them when we were going to harvest, we have a harvest date. You got to put in a pre-harvest date. And we said, okay, we're going to harvest this day. And they showed up a week before harvest, pulled our samples, and the freeze is coming. We have no choice. We have to harvest. We went and harvested our 40 acres, spent all the money, got it inside for them to tell us 2 weeks after we finished that our crop was hot. So we have a building plumb full of hemp, and it's not a little building. It's 75 by 125, and we could have filled up 2 of those. But anyways, that building's still plumb full. We're still dealing with the state, and it's just not a good situation to be in. But so that's my horse story for you. So we do have some good deals going on, and I do get excited talking about this because it's different. It's not, you know, there's books wrote out there. This is how you grow corn. There's not a book how you grow hemp yet, and so that's what we're here writing today. And it's been a lot of fun. Me and my brother, and my dad and mom, we all worked together to make this happen. And our big approach, the majority of our acres, we did 90,000 plants per acre, dioecious seed, and we're going for grain and flour both. And instead of trying to hit that 8 to 10% flour CBD content, we're trying to grow 1 to 4%. And I'm telling you, we're going to grow probably more 1% than we are 4%. We modified gleaner combines. We have 3 of them with draper headers. That's how we harvested it. And so the idea is we put it on 30-inch spacing, 90,000 plants per acre. Some of our best stands was 60,000 plants per acre. Our worst was low 40s. The stuff will get 8 to 12 foot tall. We started planting mid-April, finished up 1st of June. The earlier planted stuff was by far the best. Hemp will germ at 46 degrees. So that's a really big agronomic advantage when you start talking about summer annuals and weeds. My advice is get it in really early if you're going to do it and get ahead of them weeds. So we treated it a lot like corn. Just we figured if we didn't want to miss the fertility. If we was going to miss it, we wanted to be on the right side of it. So anyways, we grew just that one variety. We grew 2,500 acres. We did 750 acres of organic production, and the other 1,250 was conventional. We spent 90 days harvesting it. It froze early this year in October, and the idea behind our harvest is harvest it wet, because the wetter it is, then the more trichomes you retain on the plant. And it's a lot like sunflowers as far as fire hazard, and we didn't realize that until it froze and all dried down, and we was having fires every other hour in the field. It got pretty interesting for a while, so we tried to run it during the day for quite a while, like 2 or 3 days, and we realized, man, this plant's just getting pulverized. We're losing all of our CBD up in the air. So we switched over to nights, and we finished our entire harvest, most of our acres, after the freeze this year, running between 10 o'clock at night and 8 o'clock in the morning. We treated it like a fine alfalfa operation, and it was pretty miserable. But we got it done. So we got all this hemp put into bales, and we used an Oracle baler and with our modified combines, catched all of our hemp pummies out the back of the combines, cleaned our seed. We have our seed separated, thrashed out. The seed will get made into hemp hearts or to hemp oil. The flour will get taken to ethanol extraction, and which, don't kid yourself, a 1,000-pound a day ethanol extractor is a pretty good sized operation right now. There's claims of 10,000-pound extractors out there, but there's so many claims that there's a lot of extractors running, and I don't know where they're all at, but I know where one's at, the one we deal with, and it's amazing to see how far they've came in the short amount of time. But really, everybody's figuring out as they go. But so when we harvested it, we put it in round bales, like it's like half the size of a 5x6, but our Orco baler compresses it 3,000 pounds per square inch and gets all the oxygen out, and then we wrap it in the silage plastic, and then it's just like a marshmallow. And we was able to grab it with bale huggers, set them on semis, and then that's how we transport to the extraction facility. Then up there, if it was harvested wet, they'll run it through a dryer and get it down below 15% moisture to put it into an ethanol slurry through a centrifuge, and then do it or make their oil out of it. And then if it was baled dry, like it after the freeze, then they don't have to do as much processing. But anyways, I got real familiar with a fire extinguisher this fall, and I guess if anybody has any questions, just ask away. I guess if you take anything away from this, and if you're looking into growing hemp, just make sure if you ask yourself, if at the end of the day, if you're 100% successful and you grow the best crop that you can ever imagine growing, what are you going to do with it? Because I can tell you what I can do with a bushel of corn, but at the end of the day, when you have a pound of hemp flour, what are you going to do with it? So, thank you.
Do we have my slides, or do you know? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so I have a slide deck. Just want to cover a few things with testing. And so I'm Charles Beall. I'm the senior scientist at ANILAB. We're you can go to the next. Can I control it from here? Sure can. So these are the cannabinoids that are in hemp, at least a few of them. And the ones that we're specifically looking at for the THC content is the one on the upper left-hand corner, and then the third one from that over to the right. That's THC and THCA. There's an acid form. And so those are the two that we're primarily concerned about, or the feds and the state are going to be looking at for whether your plant is hot and so forth. CBD is on the second row, and then CBDA is an acid form, and it's the next one over. And then there's some other ones. CBN is up there, CBG is up there, and then some of the other ones that are at lower concentrations. The reason why ANILAB got interested in this is that we have a field operation. We've been in business for some 55 years as an analytical environmental company, and we have field operations where those stars are. So we have an operation here in Amarillo, we have one in Abilene, we have one in Oklahoma City, Dallas, Austin, near Houston, in the Valley, and we have one in Shreveport and in Oklahoma City. So we kind of cover the state from a standpoint of sampling and transporting a whole system of transporting samples across the state to East Texas, where our lab is in Kilgore. The testing requirements, really, there's two sources. There's the feds, and then there's the state plan. And I've listed those up here just if you want to go have some really light reading or can't sleep at night, read that stuff and it'll put you to sleep. But there's really some good information in there. The feds and the state have sampling protocols and things like that, so you kind of can read through those things, and those are relatively short, 5, 6, 7 pages, and kind of give you an oversight of how the sampling will take place in your field and so forth. So the basics are that you can't be over 0.3. 0.3 and less is legal. Anything above 0.3% THC is illegal. And it's really the sum of the two components, the THC and the THCA, and there's a calculation that's done for the THCA to get it on the form of the THC. That's the hallucinogenic, that's the stuff that is in, the high level stuff that are in the recreational states and so forth, the illegal material. And that, so that's the things that we're concerned about. And in the CBD oil, that's what you're really targeting and trying to make money with, and that you want to try to increase that in your plant and in your grow, so you can maximize your profits that way. There's several different techniques, and so I'm not so much wanting to describe how those are done. I just want you to be familiar with the techniques, because some of them do things differently than others and provide different information, and it's very important that you understand that. So, for example, gas chromatography, it's a heated type of analysis, and that causes the material to decarboxylate, basically decompose the THCA compound to THC. So you lose some of the detail of how your plant has grown and how the cannabinoids have distributed themselves in the growing process, and that's all in their genetics. So there's GC, there's different kinds of detectors, and so those are some nuances about how those are detected for interferences, and that's very important, because if you have a positive interference, then what you think is an illegal plant might not be because of an interference. If you're talking about a plant and an extract, it's very complex. It's not a simple one, few different compounds, and there's literally thousands there. And then there's LC, which is more of it's a liquid chromatography, and it's done at lower temperatures, so you get all the information about all those compounds that I showed the image of before. You actually can detect and quantitate each one of those independently in your sample, because it's not heated. There's also some others, what I call other secondary techniques. A lot of those are actually what's called secondary. They're not a primary method. You have to teach the instrument what the concentrations are, and those really aren't valid for this type of analysis with a 0.3, because they don't actually they're measuring. I call it hump and bump analysis. It basically tries to take some data and fit it to a model that you've developed by feeding it or teaching it. Like this is 0.3, this is 0.4, this is 0.2, and you teach it. And so those are they're a model, and they're only accurate as good as your model is, and the models aren't 100%. And I'd shy away from those. But a lot of people are selling those for in-field testing and so forth. And to be honest, if it's around 0.3 for one of those things, you still don't know it. You don't really know where your crop really is. So it's really not beneficial in my mind. What I wanted to show here is there's several papers. One that just came out of Cornell. What we're plotting here is CBD content on the bottom in percent. And then the y-axis, the axis going up, is the THC content, and it's the total THC content, so it's THCA and THC added together. And what you'll see is there's really kind of three clusters: type 1, type 2, type 3 of hemp plants. And what we're targeting and what you're wanting to grow is the one that's closest to the x-axis, the ones with the lower THC values. That red line that's on the left graph is 0.3. THC. So you can see that there's about half of those dots are below 0.3 and about half of them are above 0.3. And so genetics define which group you have or which type you have, and then nuances of geographic location, harvest time, a bunch of other factors that a lab doesn't, that we can't help with, but other gentlemen can that are on the panel, to which crop you need to grow or which variety you need to grow and so forth. But you can't take a hemp variety and turn it into a high THC one. The genetics defines within a gross manner where your THC level is going to be. So that's just an important factor to look at. And you can, if you want to talk with me later, I can give you the references you want to read. There's a lot of genetics in there that I don't understand. They have a way of actually classifying them by just looking at the genetics. So that's all I had.
So your question was, what about the water use in hemp? And you start thinking about some of your fields here so we can share an example. One of the first things, I had a colleague in College Station that said in some of his early presentations that he thought that hemp would take about 1/2 the water of cotton. Don't write that down. I saw you pick your pen up. You know, the agronomy folks got to thinking about that, and we said, no, we don't think that's true at all. And we don't have the specific types of studies that we would like to have. We don't have field history where we can say, here's how much water you put on. That might be possible in Colorado. But what I tell producers in our mini workshops is if you look at a field and you think about if I was growing a cotton crop on this field at the level of potential productivity that it has, that I think the amount of water that I put on that cotton crop would be about the same amount of water that I would put on hemp if it was in the same field. Now, when you think about the high amount of expenses that people might be going through to grow hemp, they are not going to follow a PET model or evapotranspiration. If they feel there's a concern about needing to water a little bit more, they're going to do it. Part of what drives that is there's a common knowledge which needs to be investigated and documented, and that is that stress conditions in hemp could potentially elevate your THC level. Would that be heat? Would that be water stress? Could it be response to disease? We're not sure. One farmer that I know in Colorado said, again, it's a different state, but just another index here. He said he felt that his hemp crops took about 40% of the water, or 40% less water than corn. What I didn't ask was he talking total water or irrigation water, but the difference wouldn't be very big because where he grew, the rainfall is only about 4 inches during the growing season. For CBD, at this point, we do not recommend that anyone in the High Plains would try CBD crops on dry land. At a Wichita Falls meeting, we said, thinking out loud, that we felt like your at-plant soil moisture plus your average historical rainfall for a 4-month period needed to be at least 15 inches to grow without irrigation for CBD. We think that fiber possibilities in the Texas High Plains on dry land could be very viable. That's one of the things that we would like to visit, do some research on. Rafe?
So this summer when we're watering crops and you kind of get a little bit behind on irrigation, I can tell you the pigweed started wilting before the hemp did. And the hemp's pretty sturdy. I mean, you can cut off half the primary roots, and as long as the other half of the plant's still attached, it'll keep growing. We had hailstorms break off our apical meristems, and I thought it was done, but it broke off half of the xylem and phloem on one side, and it kind of laid over, and it grew at 90 degrees for 6 inches. Then it come right back up and went again. So it's a pretty remarkable crop, and it's pretty hard to kill it, even when you want to kill it. Right now, we got volunteer crops coming up now. They're German in Colorado, and I'm sure you guys would be ahead of us down here. As far as the water usage of the crop, the earlier you plant it, the more of a growing system the plant's going to make. It's going to be more vegetative. It's a photoperiod sensitive plant. So you plant it in March, you're just giving that plant more time to create more budding sites and more flowering sites. So keep that in mind. And there's going to be a fine line in there. I know, like cotton, you pump tons of chemical on it, growth regulators to help manipulate that plant to do less vegetative and more reproductive sites. So I could see hemp being along the same lines eventually someday. But we had plants 12 foot tall touching sprinkler trusses. We had plants 6 foot tall. And at the end of the day, I can't say my 12 foot tall plants made more buds than my 6 foot tall plants, because I mean, you're only going to the combine's going to take the biggest bite it can get going through the field. We took the top 2/3 of the plant, and it's going to harvest as much sunlight as you can. So really the question is, I think, are you going to try to grow for fiber? Because if that's what you're doing, then yeah, you want 10 to 15 foot tall plants. If you're going to grow for CBD in grain, then we need to manipulate that plant to have flowering sites and really push the volume. So.
We're going to start putting out pre-plant herbicides pretty quick. You know, we don't know because we don't have the acres picked and the licensing and all that yet. What do we need to be looking for? You look on the labels of Valor and different compounds we're going to use, and, you know, do you treat it like soybeans, cotton, as far as the plant back restrictions? What do we need to do about these pre-plants going out?
You know, I think just treat it like a broadleaf plant, and if you think you might grow hemp, then there's nothing labeled for it, but you can go up in Canada and find some studies. Nothing's labeled here, though. That's the problem. So no matter what you do, it's going to be illegal. I just try to keep it as clean as you can and not put any chemicals if that's what you're going to plan on going towards. So it's kind of in a rock and a hard spot. But
And with regards to that, as Rafe mentioned, there's nothing labeled with regards to the EPA as far as what you'd be talking about on hemp. More importantly, so where's the testing mechanism going to take place? So we don't test for that at harvest. That's not anything that we test for at harvest time. We're looking at THC levels. However, there will be a test for heavy metals and pesticides done eventually by the retail side. That's where the Department of State Health Services or state FDA is going to come in. So that's, you just have to remember, and the question then becomes, is that the responsibility of the person at the retail side? Is it the manufacturer? Is it the wholesaler? Or do they trace it all the way back to the producer? Yeah, Charles.
Yeah, along the lines of testing, though, the other thing is you have contracts, a processor or somebody like that may have requirements that says, I don't want these pesticides in there or whatever. So it may still fall back on the farmer to prove that and do that. Along the lines of what's approved, I don't know it off the top of my head, but there's about 9 or about a dozen different products currently labeled by the EPA. There's a website you can go to on the EPA. Again, I think you can just type in EPA hemp approved pesticides, and there'll be a list. And it's been updated twice that I'm aware of. And the first was like 6, and they added another 3 or 6 more here not too long ago. So most of those are not. They're mostly just surfactants, but they're still labeled. They're still making some progress. Not very fast, but they're making progress.
as far as a weed control, though, my best advice for you there is that plant will germ at 46 degrees. So in any agronomy situation, God's given us a head start by a long shot. And that's, to me, that's the biggest advantage, because your summer annuals, a lot of them will germ, 50s and 60s up around us. So, I mean, that's a huge advantage. And if you can get that hemp planted and get it germed and get it up about 6 to 8 inches, well, you cotton farmers know how to move some dirt, and you're probably better at that than anybody. So.
Rafe, how many inches of irrigation did you put on your crops?
How much what?
Irrigation inches did you put out?
We have a lot of 400 to 600 gallon per minute systems, so we just try to give them an inch a week. We really treat it a lot like corn, and I don't know if the crop really needed it, but I didn't want to be responsible for not giving it enough water at the end of the day, so we kind of took that approach. But when the plant gets 10 to 12 foot tall, how can it not use a lot of water? So, or similar to corn or something. So I'm not saying that it'll use it if you give it to it. It loves nitrogen, it loves nutrients, it loves water, but it'll do without too. It'll sit there and wait for a rain.
How many growing days does it take to grow a crop?
To grow a crop?
Yeah, to grow a hemp crop on average.
I'm going to say I treat it like 120-day corn minimum. So, and it really, if you could get it in and treat it like 150-day corn, you're going to have a lot bigger and taller stuff.
Any other questions?
I'll just add a few comments there. I'll throw in my 2 cents worth on the herbicides. Right now, folks, the materials that Charles mentioned are organic products, so they're more like repellents or suppressives, and we have no data in Texas to know if those are cost effective. They're used in organic production. There are no labeled in Texas or any state, there are no labeled conventional herbicides, fungicides, insecticides that you're used to. What we tell folks, Rafe, is hemp is not for your weedy ground. What a lot of small acre producers have done is they're just going to have to hoe, and we have organic producers here in the High Plains that said their hoe hand bill on an organic acre may be a couple $100 an acre. For the, let's see, the second question here was, remind me again, please.
How many days? How many growing
Yes,
days?
thank you. I think that's going to depend on your goals. If you are, you certainly, as Rafe mentioned, could be looking at a 120-day growing season, but there is a risk going to that long-term maturity if that means that you might be running a risk with THC levels. And so some of the larger farmers are testing their THC. Charles, they've got to have good equipment, so maybe that means they collect the samples and submit them, but they need to track that, and so that could dictate your growing season. If you're in a fiber crop, or if you're a grain crop, then that has to go to maturity. If you're in a fiber crop, then I think the processors will tell us what they want. It's possible they might want a shorter season crop that could be as little as 75 days with a younger plant and a less mature type of stalk, which might have a more pliable type of fiber. So there certainly are some shorter windows here. If you take a photoperiod sensitive material and plant it later in the season, then you may be shortening your growing season. If you plant a determinate hemp, which there are a few, then those could respond to heat and light, and so that may or may not be shorter. But the growing season, again, is something in Texas that we're going to have to learn under Texas conditions what we will find.
And one thing I'll add to that, and spending a lot of time with folks in several other states, is with regards to that, it also if you start off with the transplant, you're ahead of the game as far as time frame with regards to your length of growing season. Secondarily, your hothouse guys, or shouldn't use that term, but your indoor grow guys, your greenhouse guys, they're expecting to get 4 crops a year out of that. So that kind of gives you an idea of the variances and sensitivity to light and all those things that make a factor into growing.
How was the 0.3 Delta 9 established, and why is that so important? Seeing that one graph that was put up there, it seems like it might be difficult to stay below that level.
Well, bottom line, straightforward answer on that is that was what was essentially in the legislation that was passed by Congress. And so with regards to that, the state followed a very similar guideline. Now the testing, we had a little variance in that here in the state of Texas, but the feds came out with the testing protocols, and that's how that was established. We had no impact or no input or no variances on being able to determine that. Let's see, one more question over here. I don't know how much more time you have, CE. If one more over here.
Okay,
What?
we'll let you be the last question.
We done straight run seeds. Yep. I haven't been around any autoflowers up on our farm, anyways. And speaking to the 120 day, I was speaking more towards a grain crop on day length. So, am I going to grow again? Depends if everybody pays their bills.
Join me in a round of applause for our panelists this morning.